Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the biggest problem with running phases of training or different training blocks and even block periodization in general is that people detrain too much. They detrain too much and they go through periods of time to where they're not making real adaptations. And the whole point here is that this sort of training system was never intended for drug-free lifters. It wasn't intended for them, right? And for people who don't know what I mean, it's like, look, we'll run a hypertrophy block, then we'll run a strength block, then we'll run a max peaking block, and so on and so forth. Well, ultimately, the problem we have is that most of your strength itself comes from the hypertrophy, right? 90% of the strength that an individual develops, so let's take out individual genetics because that affects things like leverages, muscle fiber distribution, right? It affects those things. So when you remove the genetic component, we say, how does the individual just themselves change with their training? And when you do that, an individual person, we know that 90% of their strength comes from the amount of hypertrophy that they stimulate. And then the rest comes from other factors such as technique, neuromuscular efficiency, intramuscular coordination, all these other things. So in other words, when you get big, that's where you get most of your strength. And so when people run these phases, one of the things that's been noted is that oftentimes lifters gain more strength on a hypertrophy phase than they do on a strength phase. They gain more strength. Like if you were to look at, say, how much should all their lifts go up, their ability to increase their lifts, running 6 weeks of hypertrophy gives you more strength than 6 weeks of just pure strength training. So why? It's because you lose muscle or your muscle gains stop or you detrain certain performance elements when you switch blocks. Right? It's problematic. It's problematic. So if you ran a whole hypertrophy phase and then you gained as much muscle as you could, and then you go into a phase where you go to, say, some 3x5s, and then you run for 3 weeks, and then you run 3x3s for 3 weeks. Well, what happens here? You lose muscle during the 3x3 block. You keep it pretty good on the 3x5. There's enough volume. You might gain a small amount of muscle, but you're just getting used to handling heavier weights. You get over to the 3x3, and then everything you're gaining is neuromuscular efficiency and intramuscular coordination. This stuff only accounts for 10% of your strength gains. And what ends up happening is that during that block, usually by the end, by say the third week, you start losing a little bit of muscle because you no longer have the sufficient training volumes to maintain it. Or at the very least, you maintain all the way through. Right? If your volumes drop low enough through it, like even towards with the 5s and then the 3s, if it drops to a certain point, you just simply stagnate. So you're spending half of the year not making gains. People say, well, why is this so successful in sports in the past? Because of drugs. Right? Because of drugs. People up their dose. They add orals during the strength phases. This sort of programming was written originally for Russians who were going to be on stuff. That's the whole idea. This is where all this programming comes from, this form of periodization. It's for people who are going to add stuff in. They're going to up the dose, bro, through different phases because they can get away with it because they'll still gain muscle. We know that once doses get moderately high in studies, what happens? People gain muscle without training. So if your training stimulus, your total volume has been reduced, so what? You're still growing from it. In the case of the enhanced lifter, if they work it that way. And now they gain all this neural efficiency, intramuscular coordination, all this other stuff from lifting quite a bit heavier weights. It's also the phases where people get hurt because it's not the lifting heavy, it's doing all the heavy triples and things. Singles are not as risky. So this is how this was gotten around historically. But what if you're not doing that? What if you don't use anything? What if you're just a very moderate user? Or again, you're completely clean. You're going to make less gains per year. So this is why, one of the reasons why conjugate type training and concurrent type training works so well. Because we gain muscle year round. This is why my drug-free lifters excel on it. I have drug-free lifters who PR year round, advanced guys, right? They get small PRs year round. It never stops. Because number one, we never stop gaining muscle. Other than maybe when they're cutting, right? During a weight loss phase, they may not gain muscle. So we're gaining muscle year round. What else are we doing year round? We're focusing on max lifts year round. We're cutting out this intermediate strength block completely. And we're just doing maxes. Right? We do 2 to 3 maxes every single week. Well, that means you're peaked all the time. You're not having to go through a true peaking phase. You're ready to lift heavy year round because you have 2 days where you hit maxes at the start of the workout every week. So we've already handling the strength block and we're maximizing it. You're not playing around with intermediate strength stuff. We're not saying, oh, let's do some heavy 5s and a 3x3. No, we're just going straight to maxes, which gives you the best of those benefits, right? If you're looking for the real benefits of the strength training, it's to lift the heaviest weight possible, to get above 90% of your max. And you don't need a lot of it. You don't need a lot of it. 2 to 3 lifts per week. And then if the bulk of your training is geared towards hypertrophy, none of this stuff detrains, right? So if we're doing max work, it takes up, 5% of our training, 5 to 10% tops. 20% of our training is speed work. So again, we keep compensatory acceleration and speed strength high. And then the other 70% of our training is geared just towards hypertrophy and supplemental work. We're gaining muscle year round. And people can argue all they want, well, maybe you're not maximizing muscle with that 70%. It could be 100%. That's arguable as to whether you're getting more muscle or not. But if you're at least getting close to maximum hypertrophy every week year round, you're gaining more muscle than the people who are only maximizing hypertrophy 50% of the year. And then the other half of the year, they're gaining minimal muscle. So if you start balancing it out, it actually works better to do it with the conjugate type way rather than the blocks. Your net gains over the year are going to be better and you stay strong year round. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.